Breaking news! Transnistria is finished. Budanov has delivered a fatal verdict to the Russian enclave. The Ukrainian armed forces are ready to move in. Ukraine is preparing a radical operation that will erase it forever. Kremlin influence. The Russian garrison is trapped with no way out. The world is holding its breath in anticipation. Urgent! Zaluzhnyi is rushing to Kyiv. The Iron General is preparing a high-profile comeback that could turn the whole game around. Secret meetings, behind-the-scenes deals, whispers among the elite. Zaluzhnyi and Zelenskyy have already reached an agreement. It happened. Ukrainian weaponry has achieved the incredible. Russia has officially admitted defeat. Putin is stunned by the power of the Ukrainian armed forces. The end of the war has been set. Explosive secrets of the Zelenskyy-Trump negotiations have surfaced. Words spoken behind closed doors have finally come to light. All this and more in our upcoming report. Hotspot. Explosive sensation. It's the end for Transnistria. Budanov's non-lethal message to the Russian occupier. The Ukrainian armed forces will enter Transnistria. Ukraine is preparing a radical strike that will erase the Kremlin's influence forever. Putin is terrified. Russian soldiers are in a deadly trap. The whole world is holding its breath. Shocking details of the plan to eliminate the head of the Russian Federation. Watch.
Ukraine can resolve the Transnistria issue if it wants to and do so radically. This was stated by the head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kirill Budanov.
They will hold back their group. Everything is fine with them there. For us, this could be more of a threat. And we can resolve this issue if we decide to tackle it. Resolve it radically. But is it necessary to do this? This is where geopolitical questions begin.
But when asked whether it is worth doing, he answered in his own style. He said that he refrains from answering. Official Chisinau has repeatedly stated that they see the solution to the problem only through diplomacy. Moldovan President Maia Sandu has repeatedly insisted on a peaceful approach to resolving the situation in Transnistria. But all these attempts have been in vain. Budanov believes that it is also wrong to expect everything to resolve itself.
It will not cease to exist on its own. What are the prerequisites for this? If we are talking about the Transnistria issue, whether we want it or not, then we have to compare Moldova with the Russian Federation and their respective strengths. So do they have such strength?
They do not have the strength, which is why Moldova continues to wait. But the enclave remains a source of Russian influence and a potential threat, particularly for Ukraine. Now, discussions about Transnistria have intensified after a massive attack on the village of Mayaki, through which a key bridge connecting the southern districts of the Odessa region passes. On December 18th, the crossing was damaged. After the strikes on the bridge over Zatoka and the subsequent forced closure of the road, the route through Mayaki was the only one connecting Odessa and the southern part of the region. The distance from the city to Mayaki in a straight line is almost 40 kilometers, and the distance from Mayaki to Transnistria is about 30 kilometers, in a straight line.
They are trying in this way to cut off the entire western part of Odessa region from transport communications. And this is the access to logistics on the Danube.
The attack on the bridge caused alarm, also because the main intelligence directorate had issued a warning. Russia is urgently increasing its activity in Transnistria. Their goal is to create an additional point of tension and to divert Ukrainian forces from other directions. It doesn't sound very favorable, but here it's worth recalling the size of the contingent in the enclave. According to experts, the number of Russian volunteers in Transnistria is estimated to be somewhere between 1,200 and 1,700 people.
Today, Russia does not have the capability to carry out a naval or ground operation. All of this is just an information psychological operation. Of course, this is all intensified by airstrikes, missile and drone attacks. They continue constantly.
But it's also not something to be taken lightly, of course. In addition to the expected information psychological operations, there could also be infiltration by sabotage and reconnaissance groups into Ukrainian territory.
Certain provocations are possible because the FSB branch in Tiraspol is not sleeping. They're working there. But again, how effective are they? And what can they actually do? Send sabotage and reconnaissance groups our way? We understand perfectly well where their journey will end and how it will play out. Of course, I think the Kremlin is considering the possibility of provocations in order to emotionally influence the local population living along the border with the so-called Transnistria. Of course, that's possible, but the response from the defense forces in this direction will be tough and appropriate.
After the already mentioned strike on the lighthouses, there was a threat of a humanitarian catastrophe, but it was avoided. After the attacks, Ukraine and Moldova quickly agreed on alternative routes of communication for the south of the Odessa region. But even that was not necessary. Ukraine managed to restore traffic on its own roads. As for Transnistria, Moldova is currently developing a plan to reunify the country together with the EU and the US. The details of this plan are not being disclosed. Official Chisinau says they are working on a strategy and roadmap for reintegration. But they can't talk about it because they're afraid it might do harm.
Shock! Zaluzhnyi leaving his post is flying to Kyiv. The political explosion of the year. The Iron General is preparing a high-profile comeback, and this could shift the balance of power. Behind-the-scenes negotiations. Zaluzhnyi and Zelenskyy had already made all the decisions, but kept silent about it. See the details.
Ukraine's ambassador to the UK and former commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Valery Zaluzhnyi, is preparing to leave his post in early January. Allegedly, several weeks ago, he expressed his desire to resign to President Zelenskyy. And at that time, he also posted his mysterious message with the caption, "It's better at home."
The information that appeared in the media about Zaluzhnyi possibly voluntarily leaving his post as ambassador to Britain may, among other things, be connected to the start of a political process in Ukraine.
Although Zaluzhny's representatives have already denied the information surrounding the ambassador's position, a huge number of rumors have been circulating for several months. For example, that he is preparing to participate in possible presidential elections. By the way, Zaluzhnyi has also repeatedly denied these rumors.
I do not support any ideas of holding elections during wartime. Anyone who receives an offer, allegedly on my behalf, to join any processes through any organization should report it to law enforcement authorities. I am not creating any headquarters or parties, and as a matter of principle, have no connections with any political force.
Whether Zaluzhnyi truly and genuinely wants to take part in this significant political race at this moment is still not entirely and definitively clear for the future. But purely from a political technology standpoint, of course, it would make sense because, again, he has high name recognition.
This is even though sociologists rank him first in most polls.
I can confirm that the level of trust in Zaluzhnyi is very high, and it remains so. His popularity decreased after he left his post, but he remains a popular figure. When you read his interviews, you can't help but get emotional because he comes across as such a sincere Ukrainian, such a striking image. I don't think this was somehow artificially created by Zaluzhnyi himself or by any political technologists. Anything artificial just falls away.
In addition, there were rumors that Zaluzhnyi was also offered the positions of Prime Minister and head of the President's office.
Could Zelenskyy have offered him something in Ukraine? Well, of course he could have. Absolutely. Especially publicly. In fact, Zelenskyy didn't really hide it. There were consultations. He spoke with people, with candidates for the position of head of the president's office for that post. As for the position of prime minister, again, as far as I remember, even before Sviridenko was appointed, there was talk about Zaluzhnyi as well. Well, because the country is at war, there's a transition to a wartime economy.
But for now, according to Zaluzhny's representatives, he remains in the position of ambassador. Experts note that he is handling his tasks in London quite well.
There haven't been any scandals. And again, we can point out that the relationship between Ukraine and Britain is gradually only improving. And we are finding some new opportunities for ourselves. Is Zaluzhnyi playing an active role in this? Well, if he is, then of course he can count that as a plus for himself.
Together, we signed a landmark agreement, the first of its kind, on a new partnership between the United Kingdom and Ukraine, which reflects the deep bond that exists between our countries. I am proud to say on behalf of the United Kingdom that we are with you not only today or tomorrow, this year or next, but for the future to come.
Moreover, the former commander-in-chief has repeatedly stated that his priority is to work for the good of Ukraine, no matter what position he holds.
Hell on earth for the Russians. Ukrainian weapons are tearing the enemy to pieces. Cheap kamikaze drones have become the main killers of the occupiers. Russia has officially admitted total defeat in the battle of technologies. Our heavy monster drones have hopelessly outpaced their developments. Putin is shocked by the power of the Ukrainian armed forces. All the shocking details coming up next.
A new level and scale. Ukraine is accelerating the development of its own defense industry and preparing to introduce new artillery, missile and drone systems. More than 50% of the weaponry in the Ukrainian army is domestically produced, which not only allows us to destroy the enemy at the front, but also to strike deep into Russia. At the
present time, Ukraine is truly one of the foremost leaders, and I would even confidently say a significant trendsetter in the advanced production of sophisticated long-range drones, powerful ballistic weapons, precise cruise missiles, and innovative unmanned aerial drones. Well, in some respects, of course, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but we can already say that Ukraine has managed to advance not only its program for the use of aerial strike drones to the scale of systematic operations against the rear of the Russian Federation, as well as unmanned boats and maritime drones in the Black Sea, which have completely blocked the Black Sea for the Russian occupiers.
The Ukrainian armed forces are successfully attacking Russian military targets. Ukrainian drones have delivered a historic blow to Russia's oil industry. They have paralyzed 38% of oil refineries and created an unprecedented crisis in the fuel market. Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has ramped up weapons production and the implementation of new technologies, which are already being used at the front. The Ukrainian armed forces have begun using subsound ballistic missiles produced in Ukraine to strike the enemy. Ukraine has also improved the effectiveness of its Neptune and Flamingo missile strikes. More than 500 Ukrainian companies are involved in the development and production of UAVs. The equipment is tested in combat conditions every day. The Ukrainian defense industry is capable of producing up to 8 million drones per year, provided there is funding. FPV drones, bomb-carrying reconnaissance drones, interceptors, tactical kamikaze drones, and fiber-optic drones.
Russia is significantly behind in this area, while Ukraine is actively developing its own new types for various purposes and with different characteristics. And that says a lot. It shows a much broader perspective on the technical and technological possibilities for solutions within a specific component of long-range strike drone weaponry.
Currently, the number of FPV drones on the Ukrainian side exceeds the number of such drones used by the Russian occupiers. Moreover, Russia has admitted that they are lagging behind Ukraine in the field of heavy drones.
Indeed, as of today, Ukraine is far ahead of Russia in the use of strike drones. I'll go even further and say this openly. Ukraine has a whole range of different types of long-range strike drone modifications, which are used under various conditions or in combination. In turn, what is Russia known for? It is widely known for simply directly copying the Iranian Shahed 136 drone, then subsequently renaming it the Geran 2 and actively using it against Ukraine, occasionally modifying the overall design and operational concept.
The war has become a powerful catalyst for the development of Ukraine's defense industry. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased dozens of times. Thanks to private companies, Ukraine can create innovations in the defense industry and effectively implement them on the battlefield.
Until 2022, we had a very modest military budget. We had limited technology, but nevertheless, thanks to our creativity, we had the opportunity. In a number of areas, we even managed to surpass Russia, which at the time of its large-scale invasion of Ukraine, in a certain sense, compared to us, had a much larger, even virtually unlimited resource base. At present, yes, in a number of missile technologies, we have achieved results that even Russia does not have. The same Flamingo missile, even though it's of a mobilization type and still quite a raw product, already has a range of 3,000 kilometers at its core, flight range.
All this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weaponry capable of destroying important enemy military targets deep behind the lines.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Shock! The end of the war has already been set. New details have emerged about the negotiations between Zelenskyy and Trump. What was kept silent has finally come to light. The agreements and words spoken behind closed doors. This will be a deadly negotiation for the Kremlin's ambitions. A real chance for victory or just another trap? Watch the whole truth about the end of the war right now.
One of the most active diplomatic days of the year. We
had a great meeting. We discussed a lot.
Negotiations in Ukraine have reached their final stage. After 3 hours of closed-door talks in Florida, the presidents of the US and Ukraine announced that they had made significant progress toward peace.
I believe we are in the final stages of negotiations. We'll see. Otherwise, this will drag on for a long time. It will either end or it will continue for a long time. And millions more people will die. Millions. No one wants that. I've resolved 8 wars, and this is the hardest of them all. But I believe we'll succeed. This time,
Zelensky and Trump are talking about a few weeks, after which the parameters of the peace agreement will be much clearer. Trump stated that about 90% of the terms of the US-Ukraine security guarantees have been agreed upon, and 100% for Ukraine. Before speaking with Zelensky, Trump called Putin. The last time the Kremlin dictators and Trump spoke by phone was on October 16th. Putin's aide stated that the conversation took place at Trump's initiative and lasted more than an hour.
There was mutual interest in making progress toward a peaceful long-term resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. Donald Trump listened carefully to the Russian assessments of the real prospects for reaching an agreement.
Trump believes that it is already possible to say that a trilateral meeting between the US, Ukraine, and Russia is quite likely in the near future, and that even Putin is seriously committed to establishing peace with Ukraine.
Putin wants this to happen. He told me this very clearly. I believe him.
As part of the deal, a very strong security agreement was reached in which European countries will also participate. I
believe that the European countries have really proven themselves and they fully support this meeting in the pursuit of reaching a deal. They are all wonderful people.
Donald Trump believes that Ukraine has shown great courage and inflicted enormous damage on the enemy. But it's time to put an end to the war. He even said he was ready to address the Ukrainian parliament to explain the need for a peace agreement. At the same time, European leaders continue to discuss further plans for restoring the security of our country.
Our teams are working as planned. In particular, they are working on the financial aspects of Ukraine's recovery and further plans for strategic progress step by step to end the war, ensure peace, and all subsequent steps. We talked about the 20-point plan. Our teams have completed 90% of this work.
After the negotiations, a video conference was held with European leaders. For Ukraine, security guarantees are a key stage on the path to achieving lasting peace.
Europe is ready to continue working with Ukraine and our American partners to solidify the progress achieved in the negotiations. The main thing in these efforts is to have ironclad security guarantees from day one.
China also stated that it has taken the results of the negotiations into account.
China supports all efforts that contribute to a peaceful resolution of the Ukrainian crisis and hopes that the parties to the conflict will, through dialogue and negotiations, reach a fair, long-term and binding peace agreement as soon as possible.
Following the negotiations, Volodymyr Zelenskyy made it clear that the issue of Donbas remains as relevant as ever. And Ukraine's position on this matter is clear and differs from Russia's. From
the very beginning, as I said, we have stated that it is necessary to withdraw the Kyiv regime's troops from these territories and no military actions. There will not be any. There wouldn't have been any if they had listened to us back then.
All signals from the Kremlin, particularly their disapproval of the idea of a ceasefire to hold a referendum in Ukraine, indicate that they do not want a cessation of hostilities.
A complete transfer of control over the territory of Donbas.
Of course, this means the withdrawal of the regime's armed forces from Donbas beyond the administrative borders. And
does this concern only Donbas, or does it also apply to Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions? Here,
I have already explicitly stated that we will not fully comment on, nor publicly discuss, the specific provisions or particular details of this matter.
The Ukrainian president added that any of the points of the peace agreement currently under discussion could be put to a referendum or submitted for consideration by the country's parliament.
We have agreed with the Americans that we will have security guarantees which will be supported by the US Congress and the Ukrainian parliament. The 20-point plan needs to be ratified by a referendum. Everyone understands that this historic signature is something we would like to make.
The Ukrainian team will continue working on this draft agreement with European politicians.
There is no alternative to peace. We and the Americans share the same position. The war must be ended diplomatically and pressure must be put on Russia. Otherwise, the war will continue. And if that's the case, the Americans and Europeans will continue to help us. We are defending ourselves. We are fighting. We are not the aggressor.
Ukraine manages to fight for its interests despite difficult circumstances. But the government still has to resolve all the issues that have been discussed, and this could happen in the coming weeks.
The total collapse of the oil and gas empire? Russia has run out of gasoline. The gas station country is in a panic. Fuel exports are officially dead. Ukrainian killer drones have turned a Russian oil refinery to ashes, causing a fuel apocalypse across the entire Russian Federation. These are not just attacks. This is a brilliant plan by the Ukrainian armed forces to strangle the handler, and it worked perfectly. See the details.
For the third time already, the Russian government has extended the ban on gasoline exports in the country. And it's all thanks to the precise strikes by Ukrainian drones.
No matter how
hard Putin tries to claim that Russia's economy is doing fine,
the truly harsh reality of the unpleasant situation
is completely different. The gas station country has been left without gasoline. Now the restrictions will remain in effect until February 28, 2026, inclusive, because even their own people are running short. The worsening situation in the domestic fuel market happened against the backdrop of Ukrainian armed forces strikes on Russian oil refineries. Since the beginning of August, more than 20 refineries have been hit, some of which have been partially or completely put out of operation. According to Bloomberg's estimates, in October, oil refining volumes in Russia dropped to almost 5 million barrels per day, nearly 10% less compared to July, reaching their lowest level in at least the past 5 years. Yes.
Indeed, Ukrainian strikes on the territory of the Russian Federation on Russian refineries have significantly undermined the oil refining industry's ability to process crude oil and produce petroleum products, particularly certain grades of gasoline. Therefore, the shortage in Russia remains at a fairly high level. And Russia is now forced not only to limit its exports, but has also become a gasoline importing country. First and foremost, it is currently importing fuel from China.
Strikes on Russian energy infrastructure are not only a response to Russia's attack on Ukraine. This is a plan to undermine the economy of the aggressor country. And even in the United States, this is viewed favorably. As retired U.S. General Ben Hodges stated, this is the right approach.
This is an important part of achieving victory over Russia. And interestingly, most of this is being done with Ukrainian technology, Ukrainian weapons that they developed themselves, and Ukrainian intelligence. Therefore, I believe this is the right path.
Russia will not be able to finance its aggression if it loses revenue from oil and gas exports to China, India, Turkey, and other buyers. Moreover, strikes on the oil and fuel sector are already creating a certain fuel shortage in the domestic market of the Russian Federation, in particular for supplying the army. And that can't help but be encouraging. This is
one of the main directions: strikes on the Russian oil and gas industry. Why? The answer is very simple. The entire Russian economy and the entire Russian budget now rely exclusively on the oil and gas sector. No matter which other sector we mean, railway transportation, maritime shipping, or any kind of domestic production, it all in one way or another depends on the effect of rising or falling oil and gas exports. This also applies to oil and gas extraction. And if global oil prices are consistently low, if the crucial export volumes of energy resources significantly decrease, and if Russia consequently receives substantially less revenue for its national budget from these vital oil and gas sales, then it will undoubtedly not have nearly enough financial resources or sufficient money to effectively wage its ongoing aggressive war against Ukraine. That is precisely why this is, so to speak, one of the fundamental and main foundations upon which all of this truly inflated grandeur of the Russian Federation currently rests. And as strikes continue on oil refineries, on the gas transportation system, on gas distribution hubs, and so on, all of this will also affect Russia's ability to continue its war against Ukraine.
Currently, residents in at least 57 regions of Russia are facing a gasoline shortage. Moreover, there is also a shortage at the front. It's gotten to the point where it's cheaper to feed a horse than to fill up a van. This strategy by Ukraine has proven successful. There is already a shortage, and it may only get worse in the future. After all, the Ukrainian sanctions, which are reaching various parts of Russia, are much more effective.
Yes, of course, Ukraine will continue the practice of striking oil refineries. This will go on. And I think that the main task for Ukrainian forces right now, practically for all of Ukraine's defense forces, is to render almost all oil refineries in the European part of Russia inoperable and non-functional. In other words, the goal is for the European part of Russia to stop processing oil altogether. And by the way, these are the most modern oil refineries. Those refineries that are deeper within Russian territory, in the rear, like in Siberia, the central regions and so on, all the way to the Far East, are mostly oil refineries still operating on Soviet-era technologies. But in the European part of the Russian Federation, these are more modern facilities, and losing them is the most painful and, I would even say, catastrophic compared to what Russia will have left outside the European belt.
As a result of the strikes, the Russian government has already stopped exporting petroleum products, increased gasoline purchases from Belarus, and begun importing fuel from China and other Asian countries. The International Energy Agency previously predicted that the decline in oil refining volumes due to Ukrainian strikes would persist at least until mid-2026. And it could last even longer since the Ukrainian defense industry continues to develop and Putin is not stopping the war.
An explosive sensation. A missile Armageddon is wiping the orcs off the face of the earth. Ukraine has used doomsday weapons. The world is in shock. Firepoint leaks footage of a secret defense industry facility that had been hidden from everyone. There is total hysteria in the Kremlin. Putin is furious and in shock. No one expected such a strike.
A Ukrainian defense technology company is changing the war. For the first time, Firepoint has shown unique footage of drone and missile production. Over the past year, the company has achieved impressive results both in production and in the effectiveness of its products. These drones are 3 times cheaper than their competitors on the drone market used for medium-range strikes. According to published statistics, Firepoint's combat systems are leading in the use of heavy combat drones. More than half of all users of long-range drones with a warhead over 30 kilograms are Firepoint systems. The drone and Firepoint distinguish themselves by striking critically important enemy targets, including ammunition depots and arsenals in Toropets and Tikhoretsk. Several airfields, Taganrog, Marinovka, Engels 2, Shaikovka, airbase facilities, S-400 air defense system positions, as well as, for example, in Solntsevka, Donetsk region, the command post of the 90th Tank Division of the Russian Federation. From time to time, there are also truly exclusive catches, such as military helicopters. The activities of the Ukrainian company Firepoint are aimed at providing Ukraine with the capability to deliver just retaliatory strikes on Russian territory. At the time when all this began, when people said we were fighting with one hand tied behind our back, I tend to agree with your opinion that this is the correct interpretation of what was happening then. But now we have our own production, and it is precisely our domestic manufacturing that has given us the ability to use our forces and resources as we see fit. The Kremlin understands only the language of force. The best argument in any negotiations with Moscow is a powerful Ukrainian army and defense industry. In particular, our own production of long-range drones and missiles allows Ukraine to regularly strike targets in Russia located 1,000 kilometers or more from the front line.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their aviation. And I'm not even mentioning the necessity of striking Russia's military-industrial complex facilities and its energy system.
As a special treat for the Russian occupiers, Ukrainian engineers have prepared the Flamingo cruise missile. This Ukrainian pink bird, in addition to its impressive range of 3,000 kilometers, boasts a warhead weighing over 1,000 kilograms.
Usually the warhead of a modern cruise missile weighs 450, at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450 kilogram warhead. What does a 1-ton warhead provide? When it hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 such missiles can completely disable it for at least a year. That is, a single crater will be about 20 meters in diameter.
Russian terrorists who are shelling Ukrainian cities must understand that a mirrored strike will inevitably happen.